there is no doubt that the rhythm and cadence of operating in Saudi is very different. And it will not and never will conform to a Western logic of timescales, of way of approaching, of everybody seems to want to make Saudi like the US procurement system or like the UK procurement system. It's not, and it won't be. It causes enormous frustration in most boardrooms because the board can't understand. So there's an opportunity, and the updates are, yes, they're still thinking about it, or we had another meeting. They go, well, how many meetings do you need? And quite frankly, as many as it takes. But that doesn't go down very well. So part of the work that we spend a lot of time is, in the old-fashioned sense, is just trying to be the Babel fish, if you like, between that is the way that system works, and you're not going to change it, and this is what your board expects, and you're not going to change that. And the two at times, they just pass each other, and it can lead to enormous frustration. There's a lot of cases where people think the teams on the ground just don't understand what they're talking about, because how hard can this be, and why is it taking so long, and why can't I have the updates I want? And it doesn't conform, and that can put real pressure on the in-country teams. So there's a lot of, so the work to be done is, if you want everything to be really quick and easy, don't go to Saudi, because it just doesn't need to work in those ways, okay? And if you go for 30 years. If you want the sale and you want the profit on the P&L that year, you're signing up for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you've got to be prepared for that. And if you're not, don't do it, because it just puts too much tension in your organisation. So yes, you do have to be mindful of it. Is it an education process? Huge. I mean, there's so many of you in the room who can back me up on this. It is. You just have to understand that's where it's going to be, and you will not impose, the Western style of working on it. And a lot of people just get so, they just don't understand why that should be the case, but it is. So that would be my advice. I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a different way of working, and just accepting that is a different way of working. And if everybody pays attention and actually conforms to the way that it is easy to work within Saudi, you'll find you'll get great success. If you keep pushing against it and railing against it, then it's not quite as good. Be my advice.
No, I agree absolutely with Susanna, and I think it's keeping the comms open. It's also, as we talked about earlier, certainly if you're at the beginning of the journey, coming to Saudi, to really get an experience with your teams at all levels, so they see the difference and take it back. Because especially over the last year, where we've done a lot of it over Zoom and virtual calls, it's not the same. Until you're actually put feet on the ground, you realise that, as in a good way, it is different to how it has been for the elsewhere in the world when we've been working, and it's just going with that, and so it is important, and also just to go with the flow in some respects, which isn't easy to say when you're talking to senior stakeholders in your own organisations, but that's just the way it is here, and it's slowly it works, and it's just that mindset.
But there is a responsibility for those who are operating to understand it, and however difficult, to keep teaching those back at wherever your home base is. And it is an education process. And the other thing is, people people talk about the Middle East. There is no Middle East. Saudi is very different to the UAE, which is very different to Oman, which is very different to Lebanon, which is very different to Qatar. And so this concept that you can understand the Middle East in our world is just not accurate, and it will get people it gets people into sort of very confused and very frustrated conversations. So Saudi is Saudi. It's Saudi. It's not the Middle East. It's Saudi. So learn it, understand it, and be ready to educate. And you can have the same conversation many, many times, but be ready to educate such that people understand that it's not this sort of blanket approach to this part of the world. It's like saying that Europe is Europe. It's not. France is France, Germany is Germany, but people say you deal with Europe. Well, we don't see it. We know that they're different, whereas people sort of put this blanket of the Middle East. it won't serve you well. So learn Saudi for what Saudi is.
And there can sometimes be quite significant commercial implications if you don't have an understanding of some of your assumptions. So, for example, if you're delivering training and you're assuming the training day is going to be 8 hours a day every day, well, that's not going to be the case in Saudi, and that might be how it works on a US DoD contract, and everyone turns up at 9 o'clock, and everyone goes for 45 minutes for lunch, and they're all back on time, and everything's working well. If you assume that going into Saudi, well, you're only going to price half the time that you need.
Well, and insult the fact there's no prayer breaks.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can be wonderfully insulting by trying to be cost effective.
Yeah.
So as I say, learn it. It is different.
And the assumptions then also about all sorts of things, validating your assumptions, whether it's timescales to import things, whether it's training days, whether it's or delivering training through an interpreter, or the time it takes to translate a technical publication. These sorts of things that you might think, well, surely it's only going to be a day. It's just worth validating all those assumptions. And again, it comes back to the fundamental piece of advice, which is to seek local support and help. And that's why we're here. That's why the teams at the embassies are there to provide that sort of advice and guidance.